This has surpassed any of my wildest expectations, so thank you. I hope Insight or myself or both of us can do more of this. So our guest artist today is Lyntoria Newton. Hello. I actually met Lyntoria in college, and we've been in contact, I guess, mostly through social media since then. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've been so busy.
Yeah. I've been pretty busy. Yeah. Even with COVID, I've been pretty busy. So, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to be here.
Yeah, I'm really honestly honored to have you join us. Just looking at all of the work you've done in the past few years, it really is amazing. So what have you been up to most recently?
Yeah, so basically, I'm from Atlanta originally, and after Hampshire, where we both went, I spent like maybe a couple of years doing a lot of freelance work, and it wasn't super creative. It was really just kind of, to put food on the table and like to figure out like where I was in terms of transitioning out from college. So that kind of led me to think about applying to grad school just so that I could have like a dedicated space to create. Because I think I always tell people, you don't have to go to grad school to like be an artist. You don't have to do these things, but sometimes it helps when you don't have to like necessarily worry about like working full time. To like just do like the logistical things of actually surviving. So I decided to do that so that I could actually just be able to, learn more about documentary filmmaking. So that's what brought me out here to California. And I did a program at Stanford in documentary film and video. And it was a 2-year program. And there I was able to kind of make 4 films. One, which I co-directed with a fellow student, Priscilla Gonzalez-Sainz. And it was a great opportunity really for me. It was like boot camp, but it was very much so like boot camp, just like reading a lot of film theory, but also getting the opportunity to create, which was really nice, and not really having to worry about other things, which was why I went to school in the first place. So I really appreciated that. And then after grad school, I kind of found myself like in the same place that I was before in terms of like what next. I don't know. It's not that I expected opportunities to necessarily just fall into my lap, but I think there's a certain like just a certain excitement and a certain like illusion that you have when you graduate from any institution. Just
it's just gonna happen.
Yeah, it's just like it feels so good to like get over that hurdle that you don't really worry about anything else. And I was definitely in that place, just like feeling the glow for like the first few months after. And I found myself kind of just taking odd jobs once again, and I was like, oh wow, like I really need to figure this one out. But luckily, I discovered this group called Brown Girls Doc Mafia, and it's a group that is devoted to women of color and non-binary people of color who are working in the documentary film industry. And when I joined, it was really just a Facebook group. And I just joined the Facebook group, and people were always posting opportunities, meetups, and with, the documentary film world is super, super white when it comes to who's behind the camera. So I was really just elated to be able to see like other people like me doing similar work, having similar issues, to be able to kind of relate to like being the only one in the room. And it really started to bring me a lot of opportunities in terms of like actual production work, actual producing work, things that I actually went to school for. So I think yeah, I really couldn't, yeah, I couldn't really talk about anything that I'm doing right now, any of my projects, without giving a shout out to Brown Girls Dog Mafia. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna have to look them up for sure.
Yeah.
So what was kind of, once you got that ball rolling, what was kind of the first thing that you found that you were passionate and creative about? What was your first passion project?
Sure. So there is a film house here in, well, I'm based in Oakland, but there's a film house in San Francisco called the San Francisco Film House. And I went there for, I think it was a Brown Girls Doc Mafia event. And I actually met one of the directors of a film that's now out. But at the time it was like just finishing up with production. And they were looking for an associate producer. And I was, you know, at the event, we all kind of talked about our projects. We talked about things that we worked on. And my most recent project was Hey Little Black Girl. And I talked a lot about Blackness and my allegiance to telling Black stories, and the importance of it all. And, you know, my project focused on youth. So one of the directors said, hey, you know, we're actually looking for an associate producer on this film that's going to be about youth who live in Louisville, Kentucky, and they have this drum corps that really allows them to like build community through music. And I was like, yes. Yes, please, yes. I got so excited. I was just like, this is perfect, especially because in the film I'm referred to as River City Drumbeat, and you know, it's so much about a community saving themselves. And I think one thing that truly annoys me, that is really, we've kind of moved away from as a society, but for a really long time, we were really stuck with our white savior films, and we were really just dedicated to those in a really big way. And of course, you know, if you ask a lot of folks of color, the people who are their mentors, the people who are really like investing in them, are not always white. They're people who look like them. And I think film really stuck out to me because it highlighted that. It highlighted, you know, what we do for ourselves as a community, which I'm totally about. So,
yeah, I just realized, I think, in quarantine, watching things so much and so often, that white savior complex is just in all the media.
yeah, it's,
Uh,
we have to get away from it.
it's
Yeah.
really pervasive.
It is. And like, even when I think about my mentors when I was in high school and the programs I was involved in when I was in high school, my mentors were Black women and Black femmes. You know, that was kind of, that's who I have to give, you know, credit to in terms of anything that I accomplish. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And
I'd love to see that highlighted more.
yeah, I would love to. So can you tell us more about River City Drumbeat?
Sure. So the film follows a founder of a drum corps, Mr. White, and he's coming on to 30 years in the film of having this drum corps. And it's all kind of about how you can sustain a grassroots music organization, and also about legacy. So he comes to pass it on to his protege, Albert Shemake, and as he's starting to pass it on, the film kind of follows that transition and what it's like, you know, the give and take of, you know, your own visions, but also allowing someone else's visions to come in and making space for that. And then in addition to that, it follows two younger students who they're going to be in his last graduating class that he'll see off. And it kind of follows their process of graduating from high school and the different trials that they had to go through to get there, growing up in West Louisville.
Excuse me. And you said you were the associate producer on this film, and you've actually done quite a bit of production work in different mediums and different aspects. So can you tell us about your work on this film and some of your other production work? I definitely want to get into as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my work on this film, I think associate producer kind of changes with every person that you talk to. And luckily with this film, I've had a lot of opportunities to actually like give input on what the film would look like. So early on, a lot of my work was looking at cuts and giving feedback, and also kind of going through the process of doing a lot of archival research. So, you know, every time you look at a film and you look at any of like, you see any like old photos, those have to be cleared with the artist or with the estate or with, you know, whoever owns them. And that can be like a really long and grueling process. So I had the opportunity to do that. And then the more exciting part was actually, you know, being able to pick out some of the archival photos, you know, and kind of looking at what would match the mood in the film based on what was being spoken about. And of course, we did get a lot of photos from, you know, our participants in the film, which was great because you don't have to clear that. It's more just about curating that and like seeing what fits something in a certain process. So I was really lucky to work with the directors and to be able to kind of go through that process. Yeah, kind of building festival strategy. What festivals are we going to apply to? What is the language of the film going to look like in terms of our summaries and our log lines? It really gave me like a lot of experience right after grad school, I would say, into like what goes into a film outside of like actually picking up the camera. And I'm so grateful for that. And yeah, so that's kind of like the gist of what I did. And then I started to move a little bit more into like impact and engagement strategy and how we could do that on social media and in person with our educational distribution. So a lot of that was like, you know, in the documentary film world, the impact section is all about what the film is going to do outside of people watching it. So, and that actually led me to another position that I have right now as an impact producer on a different film called Mossville, When Great Trees Fall. So kind of that was like a really nice transition in terms of like me starting to kind of dip my feet into impact work and, you know, how can we work with nonprofits who are working with musical education in schools to help them see this film or to help them use this film somehow, or how can we work with educators to help them use the film in their classrooms. And I would say that process and also creating discussion guides for educators around the film moved me into my role as impact producer on this film.
That's really exciting and honestly far more expansive than I expected you. That's a lot of really deep work, like deciding how it's going to make its way in the world.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when I tell them I'm an impact producer, they're like, what is that? But I mean, yeah. I can give you some examples, or I mean, I don't know if you how
that would be great. I mean, I know I'm for those of you who don't know, I am coming from a theater background, so it's quite a bit different. But I definitely remember looking at the links you sent me. I'm like, what does she mean, impact producer?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So the film that I'm currently impact producer on is called Mossville When Great Trees Fall. And this is a film that is about a historical Black community. You know, after slavery, there were a lot of cities and towns that were unincorporated, but they became like the first Black towns of America, where you had you know, everyone in the town was Black and they were thriving. So Mossville was a town like that. And at its prime, it had, you know, 8,000 people, which is a lot if you go to the actual place in Louisiana. It's not a very big place. And to have that many people at its prime is huge. But unfortunately, in the 80s, a petrochemical plant called Sasol moved into the area of Mossville, and a lot of folks really started to get sick, and they started to die. And, you know, some folks were offered buyouts by Sasol, and some folks really just wanted to stay in their home. So this film kind of follows Stacy Ryan, who his parents were from Mossville, his parents' parents were from Mossville. Mossville was his home, and, you know, due to slavery, you know, the land was paid and bought, you know, in so many ways. And it kind of follows his process of refusing to leave. He does not want to leave his home. He doesn't want to take a buyout. He wants to be able to stay on his land. And this process is hard because it follows him, the film follows him trying to fight, but also kind of going through all of the health issues of being like literally on the border of a petrochemical plant. So, you know,
Wow.
it can be hard to fight when you're unwell, you know, and it follows that process. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so my work. Yeah, so my work on the film is, you know, of course, about environmental racism, which this is a tale of. So I engage with organizations, you know, who kind of are doing all of the work on the front lines in the environmental justice movement. And what that looks like. Last week, we had an event with the Jewish Federation of New Orleans and an Interfaith Climate Coalition and Louisiana Bucket Brigade. And we kind of like had this really great panel conversation that was right at the intersection of faith and justice. And that's kind of like how we move as a team with Mossville, is that we don't really want to just like speak or preach to the choir in a way, and which can actually make our impact strategy very difficult, because we could just engage a lot of people by themselves who are already aware of all of the issues around environmental racism and are already fighting for those issues. But we actually try to bring in people who have never heard of Mossville, have never heard of the term environmental racism. And we try to bring those people together with the environmental justice organizations to kind of create some kind of union, because in the end, we want to change people's behaviors, whether that's how they look at, you know, neighborhoods that are on the borders of these plants, or how they vote.
Wow. And so along those lines, you've also were the producer of a podcast, or I'm not sure, but Basic Abled.
Yeah.
You worked on for a while.
Yeah, so that was, I worked on that for a year and a half. I did 2 seasons, and that was so much fun. I worked on, Basic Able is a podcast. It's all about kind of disrupting ableism, and a lot of ableism that able people like me bring to the table, and we don't even know it, you know what I mean? And kind of turning it on its head in a big way. So that process was so incredible for me. I was able to like work with the host and the director of the podcast, Reed Davenport, and we together, like he's so funny. So like he would write all of these like skits, and like sometimes he would film them as a promo for the podcast.
Oh, that's cool.
Like one time he did this skit where like he had his actual neighbors and friends talk about him like as like, you know, inspirational porn in that kind of frame. So they were just like, he has cerebral palsy, and they're like, Reed, he inspires me every single day. Reed can do it, so can I. So it was just great. It was great at challenging like the kinds of things that able-bodied people do all the time and don't think twice about in terms of like just being inspired and what that actually means. But every guest that he had on, I'd like to say every guest, maybe one, maybe not even that. Maybe we had like a token able-bodied person, but like every guest was identified in one way or another as disabled. So,
Okay.
and we're doing, you know, awesome work in the community, whether, you know, we had a dancer on, we had authors on who kind of talked about their books, professors. So it was also an opportunity for folks to just plug themselves, and like people who were doing really dope stuff to introduce what they were doing. Yeah.
So that, I want to know kind of like what producing looked like for that, although it was still sort of in the vein of filmmaking. All of the episodes were filmed to, I assume, increase accessibility. And, you know, the host himself is a filmmaker as well.
Yeah. So yeah, we filmed all of the podcast episodes because it would be a little weird to be a podcast about disability and not be accessible. So
A little bit.
yeah, so we did film all of the podcast episodes. We also got all of them transcribed, and we also did audio descriptions for them. Of course, there's probably things we didn't do that we could have done to take it a step further, but even what we were doing at the time, people had a hard time categorizing us sometimes as a podcast, because they were like, oh, but you do video, and it's like, well, yeah, because we need to do this because we're a podcast about disability and we want to make it accessible to, like, what if someone came on our show and like they were deaf or hard of hearing and like they couldn't actually enjoy it? That would be weird.
Yeah.
You know. So the process of producing it was kind of split between me finding people for the show, looking at different like cuts of the script and adding to the script, and also finding crew. I would always find crew for the show. That was actually pretty fun because I was at that time like recently getting into Brown Girls Mafia. So if we weren't hiring like someone from Reed, and Reed was like super devoted to like hiring either friends we knew who were kind of in the same position that we were, which was like just trying to create something. And we were blessed to have like a grant from the Ford Foundation. So we wanted to like redistribute some funds and stuff. So, you know, if we weren't doing that, then I would try to get someone from Brown Girls Mafia. We got other like recent grads. We got, you know, disabled folk. We were just trying to like redistribute, you know, this money to back into like the folks who probably needed the most. So that was fun. Like being a producer on that gave me the power in a sense to like see someone, you know, post something on Facebook about looking for a job or something, or looking for, you know, a crew position. And then I could be like, hey, you know, do you want to come and film our episode, you know, episode 6 or episode 7? And we actually we changed out crew quite frequently. Some folks kind of stayed with us for the duration, but a lot of times we just kind of switched out crew, which was, I thought was a really democratic approach to like, you know, getting the funds out there. So that was fun. What else? That was just such, Reed was so fun to work with. That was a fun project because I had a lot of freedom in terms of like what we did. You know, Reed and I would brainstorm together about different episodes and like what they would look like. One of my favorite episodes is actually the very last episode that we did on the podcast, which was kind of just people telling their stories around like disability, which actually turned out to be like really code for the stupid ways that able-bodied folks act.
Yes, yes.
So it wasn't like, you know, it's funny because when I talk to people and I tell them about the episode, they kind of jump to the conclusion that it's about, you know, oh, it's so hard, you know, but really what a lot of the stories were was, oh, it's so hard to like coexist with able-bodied people who like jump to all of these conclusions. And somehow, some way, that episode is hilarious because we had, you know, comedians. We had a lot of comedians on. So, which I love, you know, when people can take, you know, something that could turn into trauma and turn it on its head and make humor out of it. I've never really been able to do that. So I always appreciate meeting people who can. Yeah.
Awesome. I know what I'm watching after this. That sounds perfect. So, excuse me, I just lost my train of thought. Wow, it's gone, Lyntoria. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it'll come back.
Yeah. So talking a little bit about Hey Little Black Girl, what was that film about for you? What was the inspiration or the impetus that set you on making that film?
Yeah. Well, that film was my thesis film for grad school at Stanford. And there was something that was really happening that's always been happening, but I feel like it was really compounded for me on a personal level that year, which was just seeing news article after news article after news article of Black girls in particular being assaulted and not being looked at as children and having the cops called on them. So yeah, there was an incident in Texas where, you know, a whole bunch of youth were at a pool party and a Black girl literally got slammed, sorry, trigger warning, onto the ground because someone called the cops on them for literally having joy and having fun. And she, you know, was crying for her mother. And she did not pass away, luckily, but that trauma that's lifelong, you know, like to go through something like that. And there are just so many incidents like that I was just reading, seeing in the news where, you know, Black girls just really weren't being allowed to be kids and like have joy and to imagine. And I wanted to create a film that represents the moment before the police come, you know, the moment before the teacher sends you out of the classroom because you literally just challenged them on something, you know, that they didn't like. Or I wanted to create the moment before you're crushed in a way, and focus in on that moment. So my film was like, you know, very much so about imagination and about, you know, feeling free to create and dream, but also hearkening back to all of the Black girls who came before. So my film followed 4 little Black girls in the San Francisco Bay Area who were all between like the ages of 8 and 13 at the time. And, you know, just living their lives, but also going through like some of the same traumas that Black girls before them went through. And I'm a pretty woo-woo person. So like, I really believe in the power of ancestral like help and presence. And, you know, I wanted that to kind of speak and to come through in the film as well. It's like, you know, them having these ancestors on their shoulders who have seen and gone through the same things that they're going through, you know, in a really big way. So it was a hard process to do in grad school. I'll say that much. I'll say that much. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's always hard to, you know, make an experimental Black ass film. Sorry, can I say that?
You can say what you want.
Yeah, it's always hard to do that, you know, in a white institution. You know, they're not really created or built for that. That's not really why they function. So, yeah, so basically I found that I wasn't really like being guided in the way that I wanted to be guided. So I created an alternative like advisory team.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, it was
You Hampshired it up.
I did. And I have to, yeah, it's so true. Like, I don't even know if I would have just thought to automatically do that if I hadn't gone to Hampshire. Like, Hampshire plug.
Keep us alive, please.
Yeah. I know. It's so true. But yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know if maybe everyone's not familiar with Hampshire, but the school is highly, you know, self-driven, and you know, you have an advisory team every single year that you're there, and that coming from that background, like when it wasn't working, I was just like, okay, fine.
Let's find some new people to help.
And someone else. So, you know, I found the photography professor there, Jonathan Calm, the one and only Black photography professor. Maybe it's changed since then, you know, because it's been 3 years since I graduated, so who knows. But at the time, the one and only Black photography professor, and he had just moved and transitioned in from Brooklyn, and I was taking a class with him, a photography class, and I was loving it. I was loving, you know, like taking still photography and like making a film at the same time. I felt like my film would look different if I did that.
It really does.
Okay. Well, that's nice. Yeah. Yeah, it was like more so for me, like on a personal level, to just be able to like freeze a moment in a way that sometimes you can't do with the moving image. And then I would take the photos that I made, and then I would kind of create the same moments while filming, of course, you know, in real time. But, you know, having him there to kind of advise me and guide me through, that was a terrific opportunity. And then I also just started to like engage with other people, working artists, to look at rough cuts. Just kind of thinking about how, like, if I'm not making a film that's for white men, then why would I depend on white men to tell me how to make the film? So kind of realizing, coming to terms with that, and like figuring out how to move forward, which was, I think it turned out okay.
Yeah. I mean, I was really touched by it. I enjoyed it so much. And there's something, I don't know if I definitely vibe with what you're saying about having, you know, the ancestors on the shoulder and create. There's just something so prescient about the film. I can really kind of feel that all of those moments, like I can remember them, you know, as I was growing up, you know, like you said, being sent to the principal because you challenged a teacher, and, you know, being looked at as older than you are in all of those moments. And there's just something in the eyes of all the girls in your film. You can kind of see that process happening. But it was just such an incredible film for me to watch, and especially very recently having my 12-year-old cousin in the house with us.
Aww.
It was such a aha moment.
Yeah, and I thank you so much for that. I mean, That means a lot, Brittany, and I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. I mean, every word.
Yeah. I actually learned a lot about myself making the film, because I felt like, I think going into the film, I was at the start of like working with the girls, I was really projecting what I wanted them to be, what I wanted them to say, what I wanted them to share. And I actually had to really check myself. And I really have to thank my sound recordist, Puck Lowe, who was working with me. And she was like, well, how did you grow up? You know, she would ask kind of different questions to kind of challenge me in a way. And I really needed that, because sometimes I would come from a shoot and I'd be like, that's so weird. Like, they don't relate to racism the same way I did. And I do. And I was like, well, of course they don't. First of all, they're different people. Second of all, they're living in a different place. You know, like, I remember going to one of my participants, her school, and just seeing that, like, there were like Black Lives Matter, you know, posters all over her school, you know.
Wow.
And I was like, this is not something that would have happened at the high school that I went to. This is an experience that like really informs how she views herself, how she looks at race. And it's really powerful to be able to have that backing. And then I also, you know, looked at the two sisters, one of which shared her story about being bullied and being called names. And I related to that on a more personal level, because I had gone to, you know, predominantly white schools and predominantly Black schools. I moved around a lot as a kid, but I did relate to that in a sense. And I was like, okay, so like, let's just try to like ask them questions just without expectations. Let's just see where it goes. Because the whole world has expectations for them. And that's kind of why I'm making this film. So why would I do the same thing? So that was really, yeah, that was a great moment for me in terms of just like, I think checking myself and what I was bringing to the table. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the film. I think one of the biggest reasons is because that sort of adultification bias has become, it's really gotten out of control, I think. I've noticed just in my family, you know, someone will say, you know, they just need to be a kid. They need to go and, you know, they just need to be a kid. And then in the same breath, you know, wait, so-and-so didn't clean up. I'm like, she's 7. You know, she doesn't, like, you're rattling all of these adult expectations, or at least expectations for a much older child. Like, we really need to catch ourselves in that they do just need to be kids. And, you know, not to shirk your responsibilities or da-da-da-da-da, but like there's something happening to Black children where they're literally being adultified far before their time. So I'm really, really glad that a film like Little Black Girl exists.
Thank you.
And we're running a little short on time, so I just want to touch quickly on, you've done a lot of organizing work, and I can hear it coming up even when you're talking about working with participants in your film and working as an impact producer and where are the pieces going to go. I think a lot about artists and organizers, you know, kind of existing in the same place, but I think people have a misunderstanding of activists, and that there's a much more active participation. You know, you're not just an activist because you're an artist. There's a lot more work you have to do. So how have you incorporated, have you been able to maintain that organizing vein in your work really strongly?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. That's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, I would say before I even came to filmmaking, I wanted to be, or I was an activist. you know, I came out of high school. When I was in high school, I worked for a nonprofit called Project South. And we made bi-weekly radio shows where we kind of interviewed people who you do look at as activists in the community, you know, people who are on the streets, people who are organizing in their communities, working for nonprofits. And I was really drawn to the work that they were doing, but I wasn't necessarily drawn to the way that they were doing the work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to challenge the system. I wanted to fight for my people, but I also wanted to do it in a visual or some kind of creative way, you know. But I was still kind of trying to figure that out in a big way. And I hadn't really come into myself in terms of like, oh, I want to do this, you know, through documentary filmmaking. I was maybe like 10 or 12 years away from getting to that. So I was really just kind of asking them questions and seeing how they fought to get what they wanted. And also just asking them what inspired them. And I was finding a lot of like what fueled them and what helped them to thrive, to do the work that they were doing, always kind of harken back to art. And I was like, oh, okay, I could be the fuel, you know. I love to be the fuel for, you know, movement, or the fuel for, you know, someone fighting on the front lines. And my understanding of what that looked like has, of course, changed over the years. You know, for a while, I thought I wanted to be a journalist, and then I went to college and I took, you know, one film class, and then I was done. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. Especially because like I'm just naturally a weird, awkward, like person, and filmmaking is perfect medium for that, you know, like, and photography, I would say too. Like you just meet the weirdest, awkward, like most incredible people, and it's pretty cool. So I don't know if I answer your question though.
I don't know, just keep talking.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, it's been definitely, like, everything that I do is informed by like activism in a way. And I mean, I am a political person. I mean, I feel like it's hard not to be in this age and time.
A little bit, yeah.
Not being political, you know, is a political act, so it's hard. And that's always with me. That's always with me. It's like trying to find ways to bring that activism into the filmmaking, especially with documentary film industry. Sometimes you'll make a film and it will be super successful, and it won't necessarily hit the communities that you actually made the film for. So it'll do like an art gallery run, it'll do the film festival run, it'll do all of these runs, but it won't necessarily be used in classrooms, or it won't necessarily be used by activists and, you know, their development of materials, organizing materials. So I think I bring that a lot to my producing, is kind of always thinking back and challenging the folks I'm working with. Hey, like, how are we going to make sure that this is not just a film that gets a lot of awards? And like, those things are great, and they really do help to get recognition, of course, but how are we going to make sure we bring this film back to the people, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. I think my last question, and then I'll turn it over to our gallery chat. If anyone has any questions, please start sending them along. What would be your advice to anyone looking to break into filmmaking, documentary or otherwise, or into producing? Just selfish plug for myself, as I'm interested in all of these things.
I think find someone who's doing what you want to do and make them your mentor. Ask them if it's a two-way relationship, but ask them if they would be interested in being your mentor. And this just, I want people to really get this straight. This is not a let me pick your brain email. This is not that.
Because, let's get rid of the let me pick your brain email.
Please. But actually take some time to like think about what you want to do or what it is that the person is doing that you really like or admire or want to be doing, and ask them about it. Like directly, whether that be an email or DMing someone on social media, you know, if that feels appropriate. I don't know, but I feel like sometimes people think that folks are really far away and they're not accessible, but a lot of artists are actually pretty accessible. And I found, even with my own personal mentors, that like, if you just send someone an email like, hey, like, you know, I just saw your film about this and this is why I like it, and this is what stuck out to me, this is what makes me want to do this. I think that goes a lot longer in terms of it goes a lot further in terms of like really getting responses than like, hey, let me pick your brain, you know, let me just see what's going on. Because then, you know, you kind of stop the conversation. I think kind of leaving it open to what inspires you is important. Mentors. I can't.
Yes, mentors are, I don't know, it's funny. It feels like mentorship is becoming fewer and farther between to find. But I think that's, like you said, there's a perception of distance and like inaccessibility, especially in the arts world.
It's true. Yeah. And some people are inaccessible. Let's be real. You know, like you may reach out to them and it will be crickets, but you know, you really have to try. I think it's worth trying. And there's, that's the thing. The great thing is that like, there's an abundance of great artists out there. There's an abundance, at least to me, of great documentary filmmakers who I look to. So if one person doesn't answer, I'm okay. I can like go to the next person.
Yes. So what are your next steps? What are your next projects? I'm asking too many questions at once, but how is COVID affecting your work or not?
Yeah. Okay, next projects. Well, I'm still working as an impact producer on Mossville. That will probably be coming to a close in the coming months, and I will be kind of back to looking for a new like producer position. But I'm also really interested in making another film again, and I don't really know what that looks like. This could tie into COVID, actually. With COVID, there's been just so many things that, as a society, we were already going through that have just really been elevated. And I think it really leaves opportunity to make a lot of films that highlight so many discrepancies in our administration. And yeah, so I really just feel like in terms of issues, if I wanted to spotlight with COVID, I mean, it really is the pick of the litter because everything is falling apart.
But it's really fruitful ground for art.
I think so too. And I think for a while, I was not really in that place for like creating. And I think now I've kind of gotten over the hump and I'm like, okay, I can make something. I can make something out of this. But I needed to kind of get over that hump of like, oh my God, like, is this actually happening? Or and that took like 3 months.
Yes. I noticed that too, right around May. It was just like, okay, yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
So we have a few questions here. One, question from A. Your film, Hey Little Black Girl, is a mixture of found or archived film and your own made images. Could you share a little more about how and why you made that artistic choice and how you got older clips?
Oh, yes. I get this question a lot, so I like it. Well, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of like me wanting to convey the feeling of like the ancestors being on your shoulders, but also the legacy of, you know, racism in this country, anti-Blackness and misogyny being on your shoulders as well. And I wanted to use that by kind of always looking back at archival, like, oh yeah, this happened, this happened, this happened. And then the process of actually getting the archival footage was so long. Yeah, I would argue that that took longer than like me filming was actually clearing the archival footage. I mean, some things that I was able to clear were just like royalty free, or they were you know, completely free, and all you had to do was kind of go through the owner and license it, and it was like public domain, which is kind of what happens to certain things that have been unclaimed after a certain number of years. So those things were great, and I was grateful to have, you know, clips that I'd found be that. But then other things were, I had to get a lawyer for it. I had to have the lawyer write what is referred to as a fair use letter, where he went through like every single archival, anything in my film, looked at who owned it, looked at if it was claimed, looked at how much it would cost, and then looked at the way in which it was used. So there's a scene in the film where one of the girls is looking at like this commercial, and that commercial is fair use. Like I didn't have to pay for it, but if I hadn't set it up in that way where she was like looking at the TV as like a naturally occurring thing versus like me, like just showing the video as a clip, I would have had to pay for it. So like all of these little things in like fair use law that you start to really get into and learn about. So that actually affected the editing sometimes. Like sometimes I was like, hey, like I want to show this clip for longer. I want to show this clip in a different context. And it's like, well, that's going to be like $5,000 if you'd like to do it that way, or you could do it this way and it will be free. So sometimes I would go with, I went with, because again, student budget, like I had only gotten one grant, you know, for the film, which didn't cover any of the archival. It barely covered production. So yeah, that was an interesting process for me. Very, very interesting.
Wow. I have a question from Chelsea. How can I be a better photographist?
Ooh, I like that. Photographist. I think trusting your vision and trusting what like sticks out to you when you're not, like when you don't have a camera in your hand. Like for me, what actually has inspired me to like make a new film is that I take my dog, like this is the highlight of my day, y'all, because of COVID. But every day I take my dog on walks, and our walks are basically the same every day because I live in Oakland and like everyone's at the lake. So I can't go to the lake anymore. Used to. But what I've noticed is that this is just a really like boring walk. It was at first, and then I started to notice different things that I'd never noticed by taking the same walk every day. And I started to kind of view them and like, oh, like this would be a wonderful angle. Like this would be really great for like filming it this way. And like when you're a photographer, like these things will kind of come to you in a way. Like you look at the world differently, because you start to look at things as like, oh, you know, this will be in the frame, this will be outside of the frame. But I would just encourage you, you know, this is something that many of us can do is just get outside if you can. Get outside and get some air. And as you're kind of getting outside, look if you can look around, or if you can listen to what is like kind of coming to you in that moment, what's sticking out. What you actually want to take a photo of will come to you, and kind of trusting your vision on that.
Oh, that's awesome advice. Thank you. And I think I don't want to close this. This has been such a great conversation, but I think we got to wind it down. So I'm going to ask a sort of leading outro question from Jean. How can we see your other films, your other work, River City Drumbeat and Mossville When the Great Trees Fell?
Yeah.
And really any other thing we can watch. Where is it?
Yes. Well, River City Drumbeat is doing like a festival / virtual theatrical run right now, which we're like, this is all new for us. So you can go to rivercitydrumbeatmovie.com, and you can just go to the screenings. You can see all of the screenings, which are, I think, 95% virtual. So like, click and watch it at your convenience. And for Mossville, we had the opportunity to premiere on PBS in May, which is regional. So I actually don't get it in California because I'm too far west to get it on PBS. But I think as long as you're like on the East Coast, you should be able to access it through PBS Real South. And that film's called Mossville. Oh, thank you.
A is on it. Thank you.
Thank you, A. So those things are out in the world, which feels really good to like just be able to point people there, and like we've been getting a lot of wonderful reception. So I'm super grateful.
Amazing. I am just genuinely in awe of the body of work that you're putting together. So I'm going to be watching because it's really exciting to me. So thank you so much for taking this time. I hope we can do this again in some way, shape, or form, both with you in particular, and I hope Insight can do more of these artist talks. Thank you everyone for participating and engaging and sharing with your friends, and this has just been an amazing few weeks, so truly thank all of you. This has been a lot of fun. And that's all I have. A, do you want to do an outro plug?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm just
smiling
ear to ear. This was wonderful to witness. And I think I might be sending out a feedback form to everybody just so we can make sure we get all the kinks worked out. But yeah, we're definitely hoping to do this in the future. And I encourage everybody to keep an eye on Lyntoria because it's incredible work and just wonderful, inspiring artists. So yeah, thank you both so much. I can't believe the 3 weeks is over already.
I can't. It's been so fast.
Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, y'all, stay safe.
Yes, everyone stay safe. Have a great rest of your week. Get out and take some photos. Enjoy the sunshine and air. Stay safe. There's a lot going on right now. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.